Have you ever stayed at home waiting for a storm and wondered, what is this? Is it a hurricane, a tornado, or a typhoon? Don't worry. If you've always wanted to know the difference between a hurricane and a tornado, you're going to find out right now. But before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos, because here we have lots of cool content about the world around us. Let's get started. Imagine you're at the beach and the sky starts to look strange. The clouds begin to gather in one spot, and you notice the wind getting stronger. What's happening? Welcome to the world of tropical cyclones. These cyclones are actually large masses of clouds that form over the sea. You know when you see really dark clouds in the sky and feel that something's about to happen? Well, those clouds start to gather, creating a huge ball of air, which begins to spin and spin because of something called low air pressure. Sounds complicated, right? But it's simpler than it seems. Low air pressure causes the warm air from the sea to rise and the cold air to sink, forming a whirlpool. Imagine a sink with water swirling down the drain in a spiral. That's roughly how cyclones begin to form. And guess what? They love the warm water of the sea. When the ocean's waters are warm, they provide the energy needed for that whirlpool of clouds to grow and become even stronger. But don't worry, not every cloud that forms in the sky is going to turn into a cyclone. When that whirlpool is still weak, it's called a tropical depression. It's like a regular storm with not so strong winds and some rain. You might feel a breeze, but it's nothing that will make you run to hide. However, if the cyclone gets stronger, what happens next? It turns into a tropical storm. The winds get stronger, and that's when things start to get serious. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, but that's not all. What about hurricanes and typhoons? How do they form? Well, it all depends on the strength of the winds. If the winds get even stronger and exceed 120 kilometers per hour, that tropical cyclone turns into a hurricane or a typhoon. And why does this happen? Because tropical cyclones are not the same everywhere. In the Atlantic and the Northern Pacific, we call it a hurricane. But in the Northwest Pacific, it's called a typhoon. Surprising, right? Stay tuned, because we're about to discover how these weather phenomena can become even more intense. Have you ever heard of hurricanes, typhoons, and wondered, are they the same thing or are they different phenomena? Well, they're practically twins, but with a small difference that has everything to do with where they appear. Let's start with hurricanes. These monstrous phenomena that leave everyone on edge form mainly in the North Atlantic and the Northwest Pacific. But that's not all. Hurricanes love the warm waters of the ocean, which fuel their strength, and when the wind starts to exceed 120 kilometers per hour, that's when the hurricane starts to gain power. And now you're probably thinking, but what about typhoons? Aren't they similar? The answer is yes. Typhoons are almost twins of hurricanes, but with one simple difference. They form in the Northwest Pacific, meaning over in Asia. So, a typhoon is the version of a hurricane that appears in another part of the world. The funny thing is that despite the different names, hurricanes and typhoons are exactly the same thing. They both have very strong winds, over 120 kilometers per hour, cause a huge mess and can knock down everything in their path. The only thing that changes is the location where they form. And if a hurricane leaves the Atlantic and travels to the Pacific, guess what? It will become a typhoon. Sounds like magic, right? But it's just the pure science of weather at work. These two phenomena can be massive, with winds that knock down trees, houses, and even destroy entire cities. But what really makes the difference between a hurricane and a typhoon is where it happens. And while we talk more about hurricanes, it's good to know that typhoons also make a lot of noise out there, especially in Asia. Have you ever thought about how, while one part of the world is dealing with a hurricane, another might be dealing with a typhoon at the same time? What's even more impressive is that despite their strength, the center of both, the eye, remains calm, as if the hurricane or typhoon takes a break in the middle of all that chaos. But don't be fooled, because soon after, the winds come back stronger, like a hurricane with terrifying power. Have you ever experienced one of these phenomena? Share your story with us in the comments. Up until now, you've learned about tropical cyclones, hurricanes, and typhoons. But what about tornadoes? They are quite different from everything we've talked about so far, and it's easy to confuse them. So, let's take a closer look at what makes them so unique. Tornadoes are much faster and more violent weather phenomena. Unlike cyclones, which grow and develop slowly, tornadoes form in the blink of an eye, usually during very strong storms. They don't need warm oceans to form. Tornadoes can appear anywhere, whether in the countryside, the city, on land, or even over the sea. These swirling columns of air are like giant funnels that descend from the sky, and when they touch the ground, they create impressive destruction. And what's even scarier, they have much stronger winds than any cyclone. While a hurricane or typhoon has winds of up to 120 kilometers per hour or more, a tornado can have winds ranging from 160 kilometers per hour to an astonishing 480 kilometers per hour. To give you an idea, these winds are so powerful that they can uproot trees, lift cars, and even toss houses into the air. One of the main differences between tornadoes and tropical cyclones is their duration. Tornadoes are extremely fast, usually lasting only a few minutes, but during that time, they can cause massive destruction in a small area. Tropical cyclones, like hurricanes, can last for days or even weeks, covering much larger areas. While a tornado focuses on a small, defined area, a cyclone affects huge regions, like a storm that never seems to end. And there's more. Even though both tropical cyclones and tornadoes spiral, the tornado is a kind of more extreme sibling of the cyclone. It doesn't need a complex formation over oceans and can happen in different parts of the world, being especially common in places like the United States, where strong storms frequently occur during spring and summer. Tornadoes are definitely rarer and much more localized phenomena. That's why, when a tornado forms, everyone goes on alert because it can change direction at any moment, and its speed leaves little time to take cover. Tropical cyclones, with their more predictable behavior, have a set path, which makes evacuations and city planning easier to face these natural monsters. Now let's take a look at the eye of a cyclone. It is the center of a hurricane where the clouds spin calmly. It almost seems like a mystery, but it's one of the most fascinating parts of this natural phenomenon. The eye is the calm center of a cyclone where, surprisingly, the winds are almost non-existent. It's a peaceful area in the middle of a real hurricane of wind and destruction. Curious, right? But don't be fooled. The calmness of the eye is just a false sense of security. Around this calm center, the storm intensifies in a terrifying way. The so-called eye wall is the most dangerous region, where the winds reach their highest speeds. If you've ever seen aerial images of cyclones, you may have noticed that it has an almost circular shape with a clear center and no clouds. But it's exactly in the eye wall where the force of nature manifests itself. The winds can exceed 200 kilometers per hour and cause immense damage. At sea, the force of the winds around the eye creates huge and violent waves, capable of destroying vessels, from small boats to large ships. Even if you're on solid ground and at the center of the cyclone, it's important to know that the danger isn't over. The calmness of the eye lasts only a short time, and as soon as the cyclone moves on, the winds return with even more intensity, as if the storm were just taking a break to restart. So, don't be fooled by this moment of tranquility. It's one of nature's biggest tricks. And the most impressive thing about all this is that even though the structure of a cyclone seems well organized, with its calm center and violent winds around it, it is unpredictable. The direction and intensity of the winds can change quickly, making the situation even more dangerous. On land, it's crucial to protect yourself as quickly as possible, especially in areas near the coast, where the waves and wind force can cause even more severe damage. Did you know that there are even safe areas within the cyclone? The eye is the only place where the winds are almost nil. But is it worth the risk to be there? The safest option is always to follow the guidance of meteorological services and seek shelter in protected, well-reinforced locations. Hurricanes are classified into 5 categories, and as you can probably imagine, the difference between them isn't just in the name. Starting with Category 1, the weakest one. A hurricane in this category can still cause significant damage, such as uprooted trees and roof damage, but it's the most manageable in terms of impact. Its winds range from 119 to 153 kilometers per hour, which is still very strong. Category 2 is much more intense, with winds between 154 and 177 kilometers per hour. Here, the damage becomes more serious, such as the falling of larger trees and structural damage to houses and buildings. If you're in an area affected by a Category 2 hurricane, it's best to stay well protected. In Category 3, the hurricane turns into a severe storm, with winds between 178 and 208 kilometers per hour. The destruction is considerable, and the damage to infrastructure and vegetation can be catastrophic. At this point, it's very difficult to stay safe in unprotected places, and evacuation is essential. Category 4 is an even higher level of devastation, with winds between 209 and 251 kilometers per hour. In a storm of this magnitude, houses can be destroyed, trees uprooted, and the infrastructure of a city can be severely affected. The recovery time after a Category 4 hurricane can be long. And then we reach Category 5, the most devastating of all. Winds can reach up to 305 kilometers per hour, and the destruction is massive. Houses, buildings, and even large trees can be completely destroyed. Category 5 hurricanes are rare, but when they occur, the damage is almost irreparable. This is why Category 5 hurricanes require extreme preparation, and evacuating high-risk areas is essential. Hurricanes are incredible and terrifying, and their classification helps to understand the severity of their strength. If you're in an area where a hurricane could hit, it's very important to prepare and follow all the guidance from the authorities. The higher the category, the more dangerous the phenomenon is, and the more safety measures are needed. Stay safe and protected. See you in the next video.